Hey everyone, this is Cal, and I just want to thank you for joining us here today. At Intentional Leader, we help leaders take the guesswork out of self-leadership, accelerate their personal growth, fight a reactionary lifestyle, and achieve their God-given potential at home, at work, and in their communities. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let's go make it count. All right, Graham Cochrane, welcome to the Intentional Leader podcast, man. It's so awesome to have you on today.
Oh man, it's an honor to be here. I've been looking forward to this one.
I've been looking forward to this, and it's so fun to have Wes also helping out with Intentional Leader on here. So this is really fun. I got one of my best friends and someone I really admire, and also Graham, you are someone I really admire from a distance. And congratulations on your new book, How to Get Paid for What You Know, Turning Knowledge, Passion, and Experience into an Online Income Stream in Your Spare Time. Really excited to get into that. So I've been following your work over the last several years, even before Wes and I really started getting involved in Intentional Leader. And you have 2 7-figure businesses. But the really interesting thing to me is that is not where it started. You started, in fact, part of your story that I've learned in your book is there was a period of time where you were on food stamps. So take us back to 2008, 2009, where you were in this period of food stamps and struggle, and tell us how you even became an entrepreneur to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, that was a period that changed my life forever. So Shay, my wife, and I moved from Virginia to Florida with some friends to help plant a church down here in Tampa. And we were pregnant and excited to just adventure and leave a small town Virginia and do something different. And so we got to Tampa in the spring of 2009. And it was talk about being the last couple of years with the pandemic and people losing jobs and shifting and the Great Resignation and a lot of uncertainty with employment. That's what it felt like back then, right? 2009 was like a crazy time. And so it was hard to get a job. Companies they weren't even sure if they could hire people because they weren't sure if they were going to be around. So it was a very uncertain time. Was able to get a job, get down here, buy a house, our first house, have our first baby, and then subsequently lose that job because that company ran out of money. It was a startup and it ran out of money. And so they had to let me go. So we found ourselves down here and we were like, what are we doing? Like, it was a really uncertain time. The only skill I had that was marketable that I knew of was I was a freelance audio engineer. So I had a background in music production and went to school for that. And I did audio production for bands on the side. Like in Virginia, that was my nights and weekends, like fun gig. Someone would call it a side hustle. Like it was what I loved to do, made extra money, but I never relied on it like for full-time income. And so I kind of had to turn to that. And it was in that season that I started trying to get as much work as I could. I started blogging. I started a YouTube channel. All of this was like for lead generation, thinking I could get some clientele online because you could do a lot of remote work. And so we were at a point where after the savings ran out, we had to apply for food stamps. My wife asked me twice. I said no the first time. She had a friend whose husband lost a job in construction, and they applied for food stamps, and they were getting like $500-600 a month, which back then was a big deal. Food costs weren't quite what they are today, even, and that would have been very helpful for us. And I said no because I had a really hard time mentally feeling like it was a very humbling moment because the language I would say in our home privately was, that's not for us. Like that's for different kind of people. Like where we both have a college degree, we both have worked hard. I don't need the help was basically what I was saying, but it was maybe a judgmental statement. Maybe it was a prideful statement, but I just didn't want to go there. I couldn't accept that. But she pressed into me about a month later and said, like, I really think we should apply for this. We did. We got food stamps. We were qualified for 18 months. It was very helpful, but it was very humbling. And that was sort of the soup in which I was starting a business and reorienting my career in life.
At what point did you say, I'm going to try this entrepreneurial thing? Was that during that period on food stamps?
Yeah, I mean, that's when I was trying to get freelance work, whatever it took, because that's the fastest way to make money that I knew, because I had done that before. So I was like, let's just try to do more of that. What I didn't know I was doing, and I talk about this in the book, I didn't know I was building a content business. I didn't know I was building an education company. I didn't know I was building a knowledge commerce business. That wasn't a thing I knew existed. And if it did exist, I didn't want to do it. I didn't view myself as a teacher, like that's functionally is what I am in a lot of ways, or a content creator. That's not what I was setting out to do, but that's what I began doing inadvertently during that season. Yeah.
So you started out blogging and then video?
Yeah, I started my blog in October of 2009. And then January of 2010 is when I launched my YouTube channel. And I only created it as a means to film, like a place to upload some videos so I could embed them on my blog. I didn't understand at the time just how powerful YouTube is as a search engine. So for me, it was just like free video embedding. But there were some things I knew I couldn't teach in written form that would make sense for audio. I needed them to hear what I was doing, see what I was doing in the software. So I started doing some screen recording stuff.
And tell us about when you actually started making your first bit of money doing that.
Yeah, like it did not take long for the content to like grow a little audience. And it wasn't big, but it was clear that like people really liked the content and really wanted more of it. And it was like striking a chord with people. And so I found a little mini micro niche early on that loved what I was doing. And so I was just helping them out in between gigs. So I was like, if I don't have a client right now, or if I have a day or two off, I'm unemployed. So I'll make videos and help people. But it got to a point where I was like, I can't keep doing this for free. So I either need to stop doing it to go do work that actually pays the bills, or if I could find a way to monetize what I'm doing, then I could keep helping them out for free. So that's when I started to try to figure out, what do bloggers do? Like there were people doing it, but it was hard to find. So I was like, how do bloggers make money? So I realized, okay, a lot of them have banner ads or sponsors like right over the top of their website. So I reached out to companies and brands that would want to advertise to my readers. And I did a few sponsored deals, like they were like $500 a month, $600 a month to run a big thing on my website. And I was like, I can't believe people are giving me money for nothing, So that was my first foray into monetization, but I quickly learned like that wasn't going to get me very far. And I decided to try my hand at what became an online course, which was, could I sell videos instead of just giving them all away? If they were like really, like if it was a lot of videos, if it was a long in-depth training. And that was an experiment that really changed the course of what I did, because the moment I packaged up I think it was a course on a piece of software called Pro Tools, which is kind of like the Photoshop in the music world. And I spent like 3 to 4 hours explaining how to use the software, make it less overwhelming for people, how to use it as a musician. And it zipped it all up. It's like a zip file. It literally is like a PayPal button and a zip folder. And if you bought it off this little website, you would get this little download link. And somebody in April of 2010 bought it, and I got $45 and they got a digital download. And I was like,
his name was Paul. His name was Paul, man. You write about him in your book, your first sale.
Yep. I have that screen capture from that very first receipt. That changed my life, because it was only $45, and which was way less than what I would make doing any kind of freelance work, but it was different. It was like
$45.
The work is done. Like I can sell infinite copies of this thing now. And so that was a light bulb moment for me. So even though we weren't making much money, and that was 2010 and 2011 were two of the hardest years of my life financially, but that was the beginning of like, there's something here, and I'm willing to go a little bit farther and see if I can turn this into something substantial.
And Wes, this was your big bro down in Florida doing this. What were you thinking? Like, what was your perspective? Do you think it was crazy?
I think there was no way I would have known. Like there was complete lack of imagination on my part. I didn't know it existed, and Graham was the one doing it and didn't even know what he was tapping into. So like I was more removed than that, So we were aware of the struggle, and we all felt bad. And I knew Graham was working hard, but I want you to talk about a little bit, bro. You had a lot of pressure to go get a job. Like, and I know you kind of alluded to this. I should just quit this and go get some work. But that was like I do remember that. That was a real powerful pull to let me just go find something that's going to give me benefits and put some food, on the table every month, so I can kind of get off food stamps. And so I want to hear a little bit about that, but also what were you, was any of this scary for you at the time? Was there, like, you write about imposter syndrome in your book, and I hope we talk about that, but was there any of that back then? Or were you just like not even aware that anybody would judge you for what you were doing? If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, it was frightening, right? Like it was, and I wrote about this in the book a little bit at the beginning, and then especially at the end, I try to come back to fears, because you could read a book like this and be like, wow, that's great. And then you stop and you go, oh, but if I actually go do it, then like, what if it doesn't work? A lot of fears. And so I kind of capstone the book with like, let's talk about those. I have those fears even to this day. So yeah, I mean, it was the most, the words I used to describe that period of my life were scary, embarrassing, confusing, futile. I would sit in my office, my little home office. My wife was basically just off a living room. So it was like a little French door off the living room. I could hear my wife. I could hear our newborn crying, like banging on the door where I was at. And I'm in there trying to quote unquote work. But what am I supposed to do? I don't have a roadmap. Like this book, I wrote this book for the version of me 13 years ago. I didn't have even a plan to know how this could work. I didn't know what I was doing. So I was scrambling, trying to make something happen out of nothing with not even like a map to follow. I didn't go get a job for the simple fact that I didn't want one, like as much as I wanted one, I wanted the security of a paycheck. I wanted this fear to go away, this uncertainty to go away. God, he knew what I wanted and didn't want. Like, he's like, you don't want a job. Like, you really don't. You hated it. I had a corporate job. I had a sales job. I worked in retail. Like, I hated every moment of it, like, because I knew it wasn't for me. It always felt like I was a square peg in a round hole. But I, at the same time, didn't have any entrepreneurial ambition to be like, I'm going to quit this job and go build a company. I didn't have that either. So I was kind of in a rough place. And I think I needed this moment to lose my job, to be stuck in this position, to force my hand. And so I wasn't like running for a job because I, at the end of the day, didn't want one. I actually wanted this something else to work out. But it was 2 years of uncertainty. I mean, I remember the holidays, 2009, 2010. Those were the 2 Christmases where I had nothing going. And it was hard to come home to talk. I mean, not to you. I mean, you were supportive, bro, but like to talk to mom and dad, to talk to Shay's parents, Shay's grandfather, that guy, he wanted to have a lot of conversations with me. And he would talk about how bad the recession was and how are you going to provide for my daughter or my granddaughter.
Well, he had spent 40 years at a single company, right? Got the golden watch and retired on a boat in Florida.
Yeah. And so I understand his reservations, and I wasn't even like certain either. So I wasn't like, oh, it's going to work. Pop. Don't you even work. I was like, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing either. It doesn't seem very lucrative. It doesn't seem, I don't even know how to monetize this enough. So it was a lot of uncertainty, but I was on a podcast recently. I was talking with a guy named Chris Doe. He has this cool podcast called The Future. And he asked me, he was like, why did you not quit? Like, what was it? Like, you talk about it like you didn't see the vision and yet you didn't give up. And he was really confused about it. And when I think about it, all I can say is it was the Holy Spirit leading me. I felt called to do something. It was very scary. Like Abraham, right in the Bible, like God says, go to the place I'll show you, which is really awful instructions. Like, what does that mean? So do you want me to wait? But it was like, no, I want you to go now, but I'll show you where you're going later. That doesn't make sense, but he had the faith to go there. And I felt like that's what God was calling me into. And when I talk about with people that don't have a spiritual background, it's hard for them to understand. It's hard for me to understand, but I saw that there was something valuable here. I wanted to tease it out. I was willing to make our income work through a patchwork of side gig here, a little bit of that here. Like, I didn't care. Our expenses were low, but I felt like there was something there worth fighting for. And it was a nightmare in the middle of it. But I don't know. I felt like I needed to keep going.
Well, and let's put that in perspective a little bit, like the not quitting thing, to kind of add some flesh to that. You were producing 3 pieces of content online every single week. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah. For the first 4 years, 3 pieces a week, every week. 2
blogs in 1 video, or is it right?
Yep.
Okay. So you're nodding your head. That's a lot of work for 48 months. Week after week after week. And especially those first 2 years, I remember you weren't making any money necessarily. And so you have the not quitting aspect, but like there's a lot of discipline to show up. You don't have a boss. Nobody's telling you what to do. Talk to us about some of that discipline and how that idea of discipline is even, that's kind of a staple in your life, but not in an oppressive way, but how has that looked like for you?
I think when you are in a position where there's so much out of your control, you try to control the things that you can control, right? There was so much out of my control back then. I couldn't control making sales. I couldn't control my audience growth. I couldn't control anything, but the things I could control was how much content I put out. And I knew instinctively, like if I don't put out content, no one's going to find me. If I put out content, there's more stuff that could show up in a Google search. So why don't I put out more content? That was about as strategic as it was, but that's all I could control. So it was almost out of nervousness and fear and a lack of control that I just did the things I could control. So I felt like I had to be productive. I wanted to do something between 9 and 5. So when I wasn't working on a client gig, I would just go into my office and I would create and I would post and I would tweet about it. I hated Twitter back then, but I got on because at the time that was where everyone was having conversations. So I was like, I'll share it. I'll connect with people. I got in forums and had conversations. I tried to be helpful. Like I just had to do something productive. And it just so turns out that those are the tasks that actually drive an online content business, which is producing searchable content that can be discovered in a Google search, and then being helpful online in certain groups that are affinity groups based around the area you want to help out with. So there weren't Facebook groups at the time, but there was forums around this topic of music production. And that's where I hung out. And I just tried to be the most helpful guy in the virtual room. And people would then click on my signature and see that I have a website, check out my blog. And it was a lot of that. And that turned out to be really a good recipe for getting noticed online. But it was mostly because I was the only thing I could control.
Was there a long period where you weren't seeing the payoff and then it just kind of went exponential, or what did that look like over time? Because eventually you had a 7-figure business in the recording revolution, but what did that look like over time? Did it just kind of take off at a certain point?
Yeah, it's like a hockey stick for sure. And I've seen it in both of my businesses, and I've seen it in a lot of my students who I coach now in their businesses. So year one, I made $10,000 working full time. Year two, at the end of year two, I made around $65,000-$70,000, but most of that came in the back half of year two. So imagine an 18-month stretch where you're not making much. Like maybe I made $15,000 to $20,000 over a year and a half. Mm-hmm. But I could see it was the second half of year two that things started to pick up. And it was a combination of content eventually picks up if it's searchable content. So the 80-20 rule applies to everything in life, as far as I can tell. It certainly is applied to content. So I could make videos every week for a year and a half, and most of them are going to be about the same. Whatever my average views are, they're going to be about the same. And then there's going to be one or two that really pick up for whatever reason. It's the right topic, it's the right title, it's the right thumbnail, the algorithm showered me with favor, whatever it was, one or two pop. And then you get more people discovering you through that one or two pieces of content. And then they go check out your other stuff. That started to happen the second half of year two for me. It was that combination. Plus I was trying a bunch of different products. I released 2 courses in year one and 3 courses in year two. And it was course number 4 and 5 that were actually good. Like the first 3 were okay and made some money. Course 4 and 5 were better because I was better at making courses, but they were also on the topics that my audience was actually asking me for, and I was afraid to do. So business 101, give your people what they're asking you for. You'll probably sell a lot of it, but I was afraid to do it. So it took me a year and a half to finally have the guts to create some content on the subject they were asking me for. Those 2 courses were both on that subject, and they both sold, and I had a lot more of an audience coming in. And it was like a momentum. It really picks up. So your workload stays about the same. At the end of year 2, I made $65,000, $70,000. But by beginning of year 3, like 2 months later, I was doing $10,000 a month.
Wow.
So you could see how that, and nothing changed. It was just picking up momentum. And that's when I knew, like, hey, I'm set. Like, I'm a happy camper, but also then it was like, where else can this go? What else can I figure out? Because I'm not even that smart yet. I haven't even figured this thing out yet, and it's already doing 6 figures. So what else can we unpack?
Let's talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, because you talk about it in the book, but I think a lot of people can relate to that. What do you say to people who are struggling with imposter syndrome? Because it seems like it's not just something that it's in the beginning, because starting is hard. Setting the video up, creating the video, uploading it to YouTube, that's scary. Starting this podcast was scary. But it continues. It's not something that just is in that initial moment of starting. So talk to us a little about, what would you say to people who are feeling that, or just kind of lack confidence? I don't have anything to offer, or I mean, who would listen to me if I wanted to?
I don't have the credentials. I need to like have a PhD in this to talk about it online.
Yes, this is where most people get stuck. And I tell people it's never really gone away for me in a lot of ways. So the Journal of Behavioral Science did a study on imposter syndrome, and they found that 70% of working adults, including professionals like doctors, lawyers, marketing executives, 70% of working adults feel like an imposter at their job, which is interesting. Yeah. My guess is that the other 30% are lying, but the 70% feel like an imposter. And these are like what we would look at and be like, wow, they're successful. Yeah. They went and got a degree in that field. They're getting paid well. And that tells us something about human nature, that we all, I think, right, we put on a front to just cope with life, our own fears, our own insecurities, what we think people want us to be. There's a variety of reasons why, and everyone's background is different, but we all have, like, Brennan Manning talks about it in his book. I think it's called Abba's Child, but he has a whole chapter called The Imposter. And he's very transparent about like how as a child, he created this version of himself almost to cope through life, and how he needed to like let that version of himself go because it served his purpose, but not really helping him. And I think we all, to some degree, without getting into a counseling session, have an imposter that we're operating under. And this is really about me, guys. I'm having a moment here. But we all feel like an imposter. And then especially when it comes to doing something that we're like, that's what other people do. So when it comes to starting a business or a podcast or content, like, I don't know, that seems hard for me. And to your point, Wes, like the reasons why we feel like an imposter are, the question is, who am I to do this? And that could be because you think you need a degree, or you think you need a certain personality. I have people tell me, I can't make YouTube videos. I don't have a big, colorful personality. So we all have these assumptions, and the reality is, like, who are we to do any of this? Like, I felt like when I started my first business, the Recording Revolution, who am I to make videos teaching people how to record music? Just because I know how doesn't mean I'm some authority. I don't have a Grammy Award. None of my clients or bands you've ever heard of, they're all indie artists. And so I felt like, why would anyone want to learn from me? It turns out a lot of people want to learn from me. And the reason is because they don't care about whether you're an expert or you have credentials. They really just care about themselves. Can I help them? Can I get them results? Can I improve their life in some way? And it's an interesting era we live in where we don't really care about expertise like maybe previous generations did, or maybe previous generations didn't care as much as we thought they did. They just wanted the help, and they're willing to get the help from anybody. So what I try to help people think about is, stop looking at yourself and stop being so narcissistic that you're like, am I good enough to do this? That's such a selfish question, when you should look outward. And could I help somebody? Could I help somebody get a little bit further along their journey? Now, you can't help somebody go somewhere you've never been necessarily, but you can help pull people along where you've been. I write about this in the book, that it's really unhelpful to look up the ladder at people who are doing what you're doing, but they're steps ahead, because it'll make you feel like super tiny. Instead, you should look behind you and pull the people who are a little bit further behind you along the way, right? Pull them along with you, bring them one step closer. And you'll find that people in business, online, they just want help, and they don't need you to be something else that you aren't. And so that imposter syndrome is real. So just know that you're normal if you feel it. I don't know if it fully goes away. I struggled with this when I pivoted into teaching online business. I thought, well, now I'm jumping into a much bigger pond. And now I'm competing. I don't even like that word. I don't believe in competition. I believe in collaboration, but I'm in the same sphere as the Tony Robbins of the world, the Michael Hyatts of the world. Like, this is a very different ballgame now. Who am I to teach business? Like, why should people listen to me? And that crept up again. I wanted to start this personal brand in 2015. I didn't start it till 2018. I punted for 3 years. I dragged my feet because I was afraid. It's the same thing. And still to this day, sometimes I'm afraid to hit publish because what will people say? What if they disagree with me? What if they find out that I'm just a guy? I'm not, I don't know what I think people think I am, but I'm just a guy. And I think that's the imposter syndrome, is we're afraid of being found out. And when you do stuff online, it's very public. And so I think it's even more heightened, because like now everybody can see what you're doing, and it's just normal and it's real. And everyone who's publishing content struggles with it, but you might as well publish and put yourself out there, because someone else is going to do it if you don't.
So I got to ask you, because this is your first words in your book. Your first, let me count. I was a French major, so 7 words in your book are: you are sitting on a gold mine. You are sitting on a gold mine. What the heck do you mean by that? And how is that applicable to us, to this audience, to anybody?
So we're in a really interesting time right now. People call it the knowledge economy. There's a term, knowledge commerce, e-learning, online courses, where this is approaching a $300 billion a year industry of people selling their information online. And it's growing. If that's true, and the numbers are pretty clear, everybody has knowledge about something. Everybody is good at something. Everybody has experience doing something. It might be pretty ordinary to you, but there's someone on the internet right now that wants to learn how to do what you know how to do. And so that's the idea of the book, is that everyone is sitting on a gold mine, because you have knowledge inside of you that if you chose to package it up and position it in such a way, you could sell it through a variety of means. And that's the purpose of this book, is to help people who are maybe either stuck in a job they don't like, a career path that's not for them or is unfulfilling, or a job or career that they like, but it's not very flexible and they want more freedom in their day-to-day life. And they're looking for another way. I mean, so many people are quitting their jobs, right? The Great Resignation. I think people, I almost rebranded as the Great Work-Life Redesign. Like people are like just rethinking how does work and life fit together? And I'm rethinking everything. And so this is a moment in time where I'm like, hey, maybe you haven't considered this, but you know something that someone else would pay for. And some people have a hard time believing that, but it's true. And so that's the premise of the book, is that I show you how the model works, why people will pay for it, and then how to bring that out. But it's a fun exercise in that most people think that they're nothing special.
Right.
But it's about finding the gem inside of you and then just presenting it in such a way that someone else is like, I need that.
You used the word earlier, Graham. You talked about back in 2009, you referred to your hustle, your side hustle. But, I know you hate that word. And I got to say this, the hashtag hustle culture. I know you like to talk on this. You have to teach on this, but this is what kills me. It's some of your least popular content. Your super fans love you railing against the hashtag hustle culture, the workaholism, the rise and grind nonsense. But as far as your broader audience, this stuff does not get a lot of views. What is going on with at least in the West, our relationship to hustle, which it doesn't matter if you have an online business or not. I feel like hustle knows no boundaries when it comes to industries. We're all hustling in some way, right? Whether we have a side hustle or not, we're all just working our butts off. I just read the John Mark Comer's book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And it was so depressing, because he talked about in the 60s and 70s, when these technology revolutions were happening, we all predicted more time off, and we don't have that, obviously. So anyway, back to you, man. Like what is your problem with hustle? Why is that such a bad thing in your opinion?
I'm not giving up on this message. I think this is the message. In all seriousness, I think this is the message that might be the most helpful that I could have, but it's the one that it's the pill nobody really wants to swallow. I know I'm trying to tease out different ways to sneak it in. I mean, we just, in America and in the West, we have grown up in a culture that values, it starts with a good thing, like the Puritan work ethic, hard work. America is the land where you can come like literally as a nobody and build something, which is beautiful, right? So we take a good thing like, man, you don't have to be a Russian oligarch. Like, talk about, I love that word being thrown around. It's a sad season to talk about it, but like oligarchy, we don't use that word enough. You don't have to be this super influential person to make it in America. You could be a nobody and make it in America. That's what's a beautiful part of our story here. Mm-hmm. Then we go ahead and just destroy the beautiful thing, which is what humans are really good at doing. And we decide that, you know what, we're going to wrap up our whole identity in our work. And we love wealth so much, which again, wealth isn't a bad thing, but we love it so much that we're willing to sacrifice everything for wealth, for creating a name for ourselves, having power, being known. I mean, all the things that we love. And that's what has led to workaholism, and also some really good marketing tactics. Where just now we're inundated with more things to buy. We're less content than we were before. And so that's just preying on human nature. You could blame the marketers, or you could just blame human nature, but we overwork to impress people, to impress ourselves, to have things we want. And so what I'm railing against is a couple things. One is I think we were losing our souls in the process. I think being successful at work is great, but at what cost? I mean, Michael Hyatt's latest book, like Win at Work and Succeed at Life. I mean, it's a book that's needed. He's talking about it. He calls it the double win. Like, you want to succeed at work. I get it. You want to do good work, but you don't want to lose your family and your health and your relationships or your spirituality or your community. So how can you have both? So I think we were missing that. But then we also have only been taught one way to grow and be successful, which is just work more or work harder. And so I'm like, why is that the only path? It's actually, I think hustle is the laziest thing you could do, right? It is lazy, indiscriminate thinking to just do more stuff or do the same task, but faster, without ever stopping to do the real work, which is asking yourself, do we even need to do all these things? Are all these things really that useful? Do they drive profit to the bottom line? Do they grow the business? Do they move the organization forward? Does it really help the mission of the company? Or is it just what we've always done? And so I think what I'm railing against is laziness. I think the hustle is the laziest thing you could do. And what people think, like when I talk about passive income and how few hours I work, they think I'm lazy. And I think I'm actually the opposite. I think I've done the work to stop and think about what's necessary for my business and what's not, and then just only do the things that are necessary. And it's amazing. You can actually get more done by doing less, but it does take some soul searching and some intentionality to think through everything we're doing in a day. And what's hard about that is twofold. One, if we're doing it, it's because we think there's a reason to do it. And so to not do it is to say that you were wrong, that you don't need to be doing this. And I think we just don't want to admit that to ourselves. And then two, we all have drunk the Kool-Aid, which is we will be respected if we work harder than the next guy, come in earlier, stay later. And that's unfortunately kind of true because we have a culture that does worship at the altar of overwork. And we had to get rid of the word workaholism because it sounds a lot like alcoholism, which is a bad thing. And it is a bad thing. So we rebranded it hustle, and which isn't even better. If you look up hustle in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it means like to swindle people or to be a prostitute. And so I was like, why do we even want to associate our lives with that word? I don't like it. But yeah, it's not popular. But you know what is popular is freedom and flexibility. And so people are interested in how do you like make that kind of money and you still have time to like take your kids to school or go to the gym or get plenty of sleep or take vacations. Like they're very interested in that. And so that's like my Trojan horse into, newsflash, the only way to have more time is to stop doing all the stuff you're doing. Like there's no secret. And they're like, what? Like what, Mark? I need just a productivity hack. I'm like, no, you just need the only way to make more time is to stop doing some of the stuff you're doing. And so then we can have a conversation, maybe. So I'm still working on it, and it is sad, but I'm on a crusade, bro.
Wait, so how many hours a week do you work, bro?
So my business, this personal brand is all I'm doing right now. I handed off the work for the Recording Revolution a year ago to my business partner. I still own it. He runs it. So I don't do any work in that business. So for this one business, my business takes 6 hours a week to run. Max. If I'm doing any more than that, it's because I'm like right now I'm doing a lot of interviews like this for the book. Last year I spent a lot of time writing the book, or if I'm going to build out a new product, which I rarely do, but just to keep the business running and growing, 6 hours a week.
6 hours a week. Wow. How do you break that up? Do you do 1 day of work and then take the rest, not off, but what does that look like for you?
Like last summer, I just worked 1 day a week. because the kids were home for school during the summer. So I wanted more time with them. Right now I'm working 2 half days. I work Monday for about 4 hours, and on Wednesday I come in for a couple hours. And then that's it.
How do you fight that temptation to fill that? Because I think that's so deeply ingrained in so many of us. I mean, even I agree with everything you just said about the hustle culture. And I remember when Greg McKeown wrote his new book, Effortless, just that idea of effortless, it sounded lazy. We've just ingrained the idea of if it's not hard, it's not valuable. So how do you fight that temptation to just want to do more, just to feel like you're doing something of value, to make it feel like you're doing something that matters?
Dude, it's a never ending fight.
So you do fight that, even though that's something that you, okay.
Yeah. Yes. I'll slip. I drift. Because then fear like creeps back up even in my head. I'm like the anti-work all the time guy. And then every once in a while I'll wake up, I'm like, but maybe I'm missing it. Maybe I should work more. Maybe that is the secret. And you start to just wonder again. You start to get fearful. Fear of missing out becomes a real thing. So I drift. So what I've tried to do is put some guardrails in place. So I try to every 6 months have an 80-20 optimization day where I have a running Google Doc that's my 80-20 optimization. It's like basically every task my business requires to run in that moment. And then I look at that list every 6 months, ideally, and I challenge every single task. And I just I force myself to prove to myself. It's like CEO hat comes on and I tell employee hat, prove to me that that's a good use of our company's money and time for you to do that task. Yeah. And if I can't, then I need to eliminate it. Or if it can't be eliminated, then like Tim Ferriss has this great, process in the 4-hour work week, eliminate first task and then automate what you can't eliminate. And then whatever you can't get rid of or automate to a computer program, then you delegate to somebody else. But never automate or delegate something that doesn't need to be done in the first place. Like it always starts with elimination. So every 6 months I try to look at it. And that's when I come back to my senses if I've drifted of like, no, I don't like posting reels on Instagram or being on TikTok. Although there is a chance that a video could go viral and draw a ton of leads, that is a possibility. It is not the reality for most of us. And there's no hard data that says that's going to lead to income in my pocket. I have a lot of hard data that says if I post another video on YouTube, my leads grow, and then my system collects those leads and offers them products. If I email my list, I make money when I offer them stuff. So I just choose to do the tasks that have a much clearer line to revenue, assuming the tasks I want to do. There's a lot of things I could do for revenue that I just don't feel like doing. So money isn't the only driver. But yeah, to your point, 100% I struggle, I drift, I'm human. Especially when you're the only one around you doing what you're doing. Everyone else is hustling. So you start to think, am I the crazy person here? Because you feel like a crazy person. It's hard to be different. And if you don't have people around you that are drinking the same Kool-Aid that you're drinking, it gets really, really easy to slip back into whatever the cultural narrative is. So yeah, I feel it.
Well, that's one of the things I appreciate about your content is you don't teach hacks. You really teach, get rich, build a business slowly over time. I love your concept of generosity, of giving so much of that free content over time. And you also fight against this hustle culture. In your little tagline of your podcast, you talk about so you can live and give more. What would you say you're optimizing for?
Yeah, great question. So a few things right now in this season, I still have kids at home, right? So I have a almost 13-year-old and I have a 10-year-old. So I've got a 5 to 8 year window left with kids under the roof. So I'm optimizing for time with them right now. That's important. Time with my wife. We both take Fridays off. It's like our date day. So we'll run errands together. We'll go do lunch together. We'll do marriage counseling on those days like that. Those are our days together. So I'm optimizing for time with her. Health. Like there was years where I just wasn't consistent with any kind of workout routine. And I finally got into something that I like. And so it's like, I want to make sure I have time to work out. And then
ribbon dancing, right? It's ribbon dancing.
I wasn't going to say that publicly.
I didn't mean to out you.
You can burn a lot of calories.
It's a good workout. Dancing, yeah. That's what I hear.
Sorry, just imagine what I look like. Yeah. That's got to be hideous.
That might go viral. That could go viral. Yeah.
Maybe that's what I'm missing.
Hashtag ribbon dancing. Sorry to all the
Yeah.
ribbon dancers on our audience that just,
I know. I feel like we're
unsubscribed.
offending. There's one person that's like, who are these punks?
They're going to
making
shut
fun
it down. They're going to blow this up. Yeah.
Oh man. Yep. So yeah, ribbon dancing has been good. I optimized for that. I mean, so for us, travel is important. Like a couple of years ago, one of my big bucket list things was, could I take a month off and go live in another country for a month and have my business still run? So that was like a challenge for myself. And so we just booked Airbnbs in the south of France and like booked plane tickets and said, we're going to do it. And so we as a family were there for a month. And I stayed for another 2 weeks. I did like a cycling tour tied around the Tour de France, which is like a big bucket list thing for me too. So I spent 6 weeks in Europe. And my plan was to work 2 hours a week, like to open the laptop and just check in. But the internet was so bad out in the middle of nowhere that I just had to give up. And like, it still worked. Money still kept coming in. And that was a big challenge that I was accepted. So travel is important. But like it changes. So this next season I'm going into of trying to become an author. I mean, I am an author, but like trying to be like that, be more of a big pillar of what I do and be more intentional to write and then speak. I want to do more public speaking. I really have enjoyed that, but I haven't had the margin to do that. So to get serious, to write and speak and I hate to use that language, be a thought leader. Like I want to create resources and content that change people's thoughts. So that's what I view like a thought leader is. To do that, I have to be even more of a learner than I am. I feel like I'm an avid reader. I feel like I take a lot of courses, but what I'm optimizing for now, like literally, Cal, like I've redone my vision for the way I want the year to wrap up. So into 2023, I want to be working only on Mondays. I want to get it down to 4 hours a week. And then Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, all I'm going to be doing is reading books and writing my next book and crafting talks or speeches. I want to read, write, and prepare speeches. And so I just want the time to do that kind of work, which maybe doesn't pay the bills right now as much and maybe seems like introspective, but could be career changing or just personally fulfilling.
Dude, I love, that's like a beautiful segue to a question that I have for you is, you're a dude who's got 2 separate businesses that are both 7-figure plus businesses. And you just mentioned that you want more time to grow, right? And one of those things that you've done recently, I know, is you've hired at great cost to yourself, a preeminent high performance coach. But a lot of people would look at you and feel like that's crazy. You're already successful. Like, what are you doing? Why would you spend that kind of money? And what on earth could a high performance coach tell somebody that owns 2 7-figure businesses?
A lot. So there's like the personal itch, like I love learning. And then there's the human desire to like fulfill our God-given potential. I've exhausted almost every resource I can to get where I am now. And what I feel like I need in this season, and to be specific, is I want to learn the power of asking better questions. As someone who coaches people, I feel like I'm good in some contexts, but I've seen my limitations. And I think like the best athletes in the world spend a lot of money on coaching, right? They're already the best in the world. Why do they have coaches? Because they know that coaches bring the best out of them. That's why they're the best in the world. So it would be foolish to think when you get to a level, you don't need a coach anymore. It's like the opposite. The LeBron Jameses of the world, the Olympic athletes of the world, all have coaches. Some are physical and a lot of them are mindset, because then they even know that's not even about their physicality or the way they throw the ball. It's their mindset. And so they know something that I think a lot of people don't know. And you don't have to pay a lot of money for a coach. Just read books, because it's this, in a lot of ways, it's the same. Like you can be mentored by a book or by a person or both, but that's important to me because I've gotten to places where I'm like, dude, I'm plateauing. Like this is all I know. I need to be stretched. I need to be challenged. This has been a hard year for me, an exciting year, but I'm doing things that make me feel uncomfortable and I hate it, but I like it. Like writing a book was uncomfortable. It would have been a lot easier to just keep doing what I do. And podcasts are easy. YouTube is easy. Courses are easy for me. Writing a book and then having to work with a publisher and then having to get pressed, like it just feels like so different, but it's been good for me. And I want to be stretched and I don't want to stay stagnant. It doesn't mean I want to work a lot of hours. There's a difference, but I want to grow and be stretched. And I think they go together. If you can get your work under control, whether you work for somebody else or not, this really does apply if you work for somebody else too, because you want to transition your value from being how many hours and you haven't with your butt in a seat to how much value you actually bring to the organization. And that takes really understanding what your superiors and your managers need and what the mission of the organization is. And you can be creative. And if you can show value, it has nothing to do with your hours. And eventually you can change the tide of like, hey, it's not me coming in earlier that's going to make this a better place. It's certain things I do. Once you figure that out, you might get the privilege of more hours or more flexibility with your time. And then you have more time to invest in yourself with coaching or books or webinars or courses or whatever. And then you become unstoppable because you're learning, you have more value to add, and the cycle continues.
I love it.
Graham, I want to ask you this one last question, and then I want you to tell us a little bit about the book or just where people can find it and you. But you seem to lead yourself well. Even just hearing you talk through some of the, I can just hear little, you have clarity about this next phase. You have clarity about some things you want to try. It seems like you have some specific habits where you go through your business task and you eliminate. What is one habit or routine or ritual that you think has just really made the biggest positive difference for you?
One thing that I feel like helps me is I hate journaling. So I maybe this is a contradictory statement. I would say I'm not a journaler. And yet I would say the most powerful thing that I do that's habitual, that if I don't think of it as journaling because it's not on paper, but I have a running list on my Apple Notes app on my phone and running random Google Docs that are probably still untitled somewhere, where I map out a vision for what I want things to look like. I write it out. Whatever comes to mind is your vision. You don't even have to compartmentalize it. It could be career that comes to mind. It could be family. It could be a lot of things. It could be weight loss goals. It could be whatever, but you map out like, well, these would be the things that would be true if they were the best 3 years of my life. That's a starting point, because then you start to unpack what your true desires are. And most of us have never done that. We do what we think we want, or what somebody told us we should want, or what we think we should want. And we should all over ourselves, as people say, and that's how you end up drifting through life, and you become a 60-year-old man or woman. And you're like, what did I do with my life? Because you never stop to think a simple question, which is, New Year's resolutions are kind of pointless, right? Because I think Tony Robbins says everyone overestimates what they can do in a year, but they underestimate what they can do in a decade.
Right.
And I think like 10 years might seem like a long time. So the 3 years is like, what would it look like in the next 3 years if it's the best 3 years of your life? And then 4 simple follow-up questions. What are the dangers that are going to get in the way of that vision? External dangers, internal dangers, like the way you think, your personality, your tendencies. What are the dangers? List them out. Be honest. What are the biggest opportunities in front of you that could lead to that vision? Like you probably have some opportunities right in front of you. What are your biggest 2 to 3 unique strengths? That's cool to know. And then what are the dark sides of those strengths? One of the strengths you pointed out earlier, Wes, is that I have a strength of discipline. Yeah. I was just coaching my mastermind students today. I was telling guys, one of my biggest strengths is discipline. You know what the dark side of discipline is? I'm not very curious. I don't experiment. I just don't change things. And so there's a dark side. There's a pro and there's a con. And so if you just walk through those 5 questions, the 3-year vision, and then the 4 follow-up questions, if you just one piece of paper, maybe 30 to 60 minutes, that you could look at that, all of a sudden, you could have so much clarity.
That's great.
To know, like, man, my job does not line up with this. The way I'm treating my wife does not line up with this. What I'm doing on the weekends is not going to get me there. Like, that's so helpful. And then you'll figure out what to do next, because everyone's path is different. You can't really prescribe that. But I think that self-awareness, that little exercise, that's for me. I do stuff like that. That's been the most helpful thing for me. And I drift away from it, and then I try to come back to it at least once a year and do that kind of exercise.
That's so good.
Do you have multiple? So on iPhone, do you have multiple notes open, or you just have one that you just keep adding to as like a journal?
Multiple notes, and I'll title them. Like if it's just like a financial vision, like, or a work vision. But in Google, like I'll sometimes just write up those 4 questions in a Google Doc, and I'll call it the 3-year vision. Or I'll just like, again, I get my thoughts out.
Yeah.
And when I see them, I mean, you know how that is. Like when you see it written in front of you, you instantly know if it's honest or not, but you almost have to get it out first to be like, no, that's what I think I should write, but that's not it. Or you get it out, you're like, oh my gosh, that's really it.
Yeah.
That's it. And it's just revealing. And I think people are too busy hustling, too busy, or they're too tired. Like, here's the negative thing about hustle. Like, I don't want to pick on people, because like the reality is if you overwork or work too hard, you're exhausted at night. You're exhausted on the weekends. And so when you're exhausted, you don't have the brain power, the mental prowess for that in that moment. Mental cognition, like people say we're cognitive misers. Like, we have a limited finite amount of cognition to use. And if you've used it all, just busting out work, you got nothing left for yourself to like do self-discovery. And a lot of the stuff the philosophers used to do that allowed them to live rich lives, because they take the time to think. And we don't have a culture that values thought. We have a culture that values production at the sake for production. And so I think it's hard. It's hard when you're exhausted. If you have a family or a spouse, it's even doubly hard. So last thing I would say about it is, man, if that's you, like, talk to your spouse, talk to your family, talk to your employer, and find 4 hours, like a half day or a day that you can take off once, like take a mental health day or something. Like, I just need one day. What can we do to set it up, even if I have to plan it out months in advance, so I can have a day where I can go somewhere else visually stimulating, somewhere beautiful, somewhere that's inspiring. It could be a nice coffee shop in your town. It could be, I like the beach, or I like to be by water. Something about water calms me down. Be somewhere different, and then just have time to think about your vision. One day away, even if you don't go overnight, even just one work day away, could change the course of your life. But you do need to carve out the space and be honest with yourself that you're going to be exhausted every night. So you might not be able to do it when you come home. You might not be able to do it on the weekend, but it's worth doing. And those are the moments that you can completely alter the course of your life, that 3 years from now, everything looks different. It may not look much different in 3 days, but 3 years from now, you'll look back and be like, that was the day that I got honest about what I really want in life, and changed.
That's so valuable. And I love to, going back to the notes, the idea of capturing those thoughts while they're fresh. I was cutting the grass the other day and I just had all these great thoughts that came to me, but in fact, I ended up doing like a little voice memo because I didn't want to forget them, but I'll have the best thoughts, but then I'll forget them soon after. Well, Graham, this has been so much fun. Sorry to keep you over. In the last just like 30 seconds, tell people where to follow you, connect with you, get the book. Really appreciate you coming on today, and just so thankful for the great work you're doing.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, the book is called How to Get Paid for What You Know. It drops March 22nd. So depending on when you hear it, it might already be out. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. But if you go to grahamcochrane.com/book, there's a bunch of pre-order bonuses that might still be up to even after the book drops. About $100 worth of bonuses, an audio course, some downloadables. Right now, if you pre-order the first 2 chapters of the book for free, just some goodies that I'm doing. And I'm giving away a free 90-minute coaching session to one lucky pre-orderer. So I'll just take your receipt there. You can enter in the information there wherever you buy it. Doesn't matter where you buy it. So that's the biggest thing. And I would just say, hey, if you like the book, leave a review. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know how it's helped you.
Absolutely. All right, Graham. Thanks so much.
Great to see you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Bro, it's a pleasure. Good to see you.
I'll talk to you tomorrow, I'm sure. Love you, man.